Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
And listeners, welcome back to the Farm for Profit Podcast. You got Tanner and Corey sitting here, hanging out in the studio, ready to take on a topic we are both super pumped.
I'm just going to let you do the whole intro. You don't ever want me to talk anymore?
No. You can't remember your name one time.
One time.
Which is going to be a show that comes out after this show. But sometimes you just got to do it yourself.
Yep. I'm excited for this show. But before we get into the show, listeners, we love your comments. Please review. Mm-hmm. Send us any guest suggestions to farmforprofitllc@gmail.com. You can always call or text as well, 515-207-9640. And gosh, do you got any? You don't have anything pulled up for a review?
I don't, because I have a favor. I have a favor to ask this time. You can listen to a Farm for Profit production every day of the work week now.
Can you?
You can.
How?
You've got Monday. Farm for Profit episode drops. Tuesday, What's Working in Ag segment drops. Wednesday, Rush Hour Ag, which has been getting a phenomenal response. We appreciate everybody that's going over there. But if you have any interest in policy, any discussion around what laws, regulations, ordinances.
Fairly Iowa focused for now, but we'll get into some national.
Got to start with our
stuff.
connections here.
Yep.
Which is really great. Thursday comes out Farm for Fun. And now on Friday is Beyond the Jacket, our FFA-focused podcast. Really excited about those three ladies, Lacey, Paige, and Rachel hosting that one. Really cool. So my favor is go check them out. It may not be your cup of tea, and that's fine, but I'd appreciate you at least trying one of them. That would be greatly appreciated by us.
Absolutely. Well, there's 2 more days you got to fill, so.
I know. And I think it's coming. It's so cool. You guys are fantastic in providing us suggestions for content, guest ideas. We really do appreciate that. This is a topic that has also been requested. And it's one of those that when the request comes in and Corey goes, we need to do this.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about PGRs today. I'm not hiding it. That's what we're going to talk about. We have had...
You say that like it's a dirty word.
It's not a dirty word. It's just something that's thrown out in every high-yield conversation, every almost agronomic, whenever we're talking about spraying a product on, we got to have a PGR. And every time we've had Gunny and AgXplore on, we discuss PGRs very lightly and we go, we need to do a full show on that. Mm-hmm. And so now we're going to do that full show.
We are. And I'm excited to have Gunny here because knowing from experience the conversations that we've had, you do a great job of explaining things. And I'm excited to hear what kind of analogies we're going to come up with to make it relatable. But welcome back to the Slater studio.
Thank you, guys.
Gunny with AgX.
Great to be here, guys. Good morning.
You got a good shirt on, too.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. So do you. You're looking sharp today,
it's
buddy.
It's actually a poncho shirt.
Oh,
I have some of those shirts. Those are awesome.
Yep.
Mine's Carhartt. I still love this shirt.
Now we got to give Zach crap because he sent us a bunch of stuff, but it wasn't a poncho shirt.
Yeah.
No, we're going to get more poncho shirts.
Well, and I'm excited. This episode, yes, AgX is a partner of ours, but Gunny's here because of his expertise and because of his way to communicate. And he even volunteered to take the trash out for me this morning. Stopped by my house, took the trash to the curb.
I did. You got a nice place. Great family, buddy.
Zach, it's in the calendar invite, bud. No, that was really funny. So let's give the listeners just a high level. They know who you are, but high level background, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so guys, good morning. I'm Gunther Krebs. I'm with AgXplore. I'm the Executive Vice President of AgXplore. I also oversee several of our departments. So one of the responsibilities that I have is to work with product development, which is what I absolutely love to do and geek out on. So that's what we're going to do today when we talk about PGRs. I also oversee our marketing and agronomy teams and our regulatory department as well. So wear many hats, and for a guy that can't wear a hat, so I seem to wear many hats, but love what I do. I literally travel the globe in search of technologies. I've been overseas once this year. I'm going to go on again. So yet this year. So I'm looking forward to geeking out with you guys today. So it's going to be fun.
There's one thing that even 2 years ago on this podcast that I didn't know we would have access to. I'm looking at our schedule here, Corey, for the next 4 profit shows. we get to have a conversation with either the CEO or someone from the executive team. So we're not dealing with just sales departments. We're not dealing with baseline employees. We're dealing with the people who have instrumental roles into these topics that we're talking about.
And I love that we get a peek into the back door, basically, of how this works. When you say you're overseas looking for product, you sound like a diamond, like a blood diamond dealer or something. Like, I'm going to go find something in this nook and cranny of the world that hasn't been discovered yet. So,
Hey man, you should see the places we've been and the places that we're going.
Yep. And so one of the things I did this spring, like, it's crazy. You hear something. I heard something on Ag PhD, and they were talking about where the herbicide Callisto came from. And there is a tree. It came from a tree, a bottle brush tree, a callistemon tree. And so I ordered a couple. I have them in my yard now.
Right on.
Because some guy saw that there was no broadleafs growing around this tree, and that's where. And like stuff like that. I love the development of products, how it comes, and then people might go, "Oh, herbicide bad." Well, it's a naturally derived product. They just kind of chemically change it a little bit, and so it's kind of cool.
All right, so you have said PGR probably 11 times already in the first 5 minutes of this podcast.
Yes.
Gunny, what the heck is a PGR?
All right, so that's a term that gets thrown around really loosely in agriculture. So PGR stands for Plant Growth Regulator, okay? Most of us in agriculture are referring to plant growth hormones, which is probably where I'm going to spend most of my time today talking with you guys, because that's what really, as farmers, so you guys that are watching, that's what you're dealing with. Unless you're in cotton country, okay? So if you're in cotton country, you're using some mepiquat, and that is a regulator that's going to finish that crop off. So, but today, the EPA deems the plant growth hormones that I'm going to talk about today underneath the PGR category. So they are hormones that physically tell a plant what to do, whether it's to spend its energy on roots followed by shoots, or to mobilize nutrients, or to retain yield. That's what these hormones are doing.
Yeah, so we're not going to talk about the cotton side of things today, but let's just touch on that real quick so we get that out of the way.
Yeah, so guys, in cotton country, there's a PGR called mepiquat chloride. And what it does is it ends the crop, right? And it finishes that crop off so guys can get that harvester in there in a timely manner.
So isn't like 2,4-D a plant, doesn't that changes the plant's growth? Is that a plant growth regulator?
Yeah, it's not a plant growth regulator. That's straight up herbicide, buddy.
Okay, well, but it makes the plant grow faster
Yeah,
and burst cells, right?
Sure.
I see where you came from.
Right? I'm just asking. The reason I wanted to do this show, and I want to reiterate, like, AgXplore is our partner, but they did not ask for this show. We asked AgXplore to come and be the expert on this show. So,
Technically, the listeners asked for it.
yeah.
So
Right? And so we found the best expert we know, and we're going to talk about this stuff. So let's dive in. So you're saying it's not actually mostly PGRs, it's plant growth hormones.
PGHs.
Yeah, PGHs. So when I give presentations, guys, I talk about plant growth hormones.
What about history? When did we start using PGRs?
That's a good question. I've been in this business now for 25 years, and there had been PGRs just coming into the market, like IBA and Kyneton, that were starting to gain traction back then. Really, they started taking off in the last 15 years. That's when we started seeing more and more of the PGRs come out for that early season plant growth, which is really where PGRs have been focused, and that post-herbicide application. Then they evolved into even to that seeding application, going with planters and starter fertilizers. Now, today, I'll tell you guys, in the last probably 8 to 10 years, we've been focusing on late season PGRs. How do we influence a crop to drop stress late season and retain yield, right? Retain those fruiting sites, stop that tip back on corn, stop that pod abortion on soybeans. So
We've talked about that before, and I believe with members of your team, and usually that's in a conversation with fungicides. We're trying to reduce the stress, do the things you just described.
right.
Do they go hand in hand?
They do. You know, guys, let's face it, we can do everything right. We can set the stage, and Mother Nature comes in late season and she turns off that water spigot and she gets hot, and all of a sudden that crop starts to respond. And in beans, they do that pod abortion, and corn, it does tip back, right? And we've all seen it, but that's yield that we lose. We made it and then we lost it.
So let's first talk about, before we dive into the science behind and all the different combinations that can go into a formulation, you kind of talked a little bit about when things get applied.
Yeah.
You said it's typically post-emergence herbicide pass.
Yeah.
And then is it that fungicide application time period, or what are we looking at? Corn, soybeans.
Okay, so let's go back. Can I start like this, Tanner?
Yeah.
Can I explain some things like growth versus development before I get into that? So, guys, when you think about growth is physically changing that mass, right? The making a bigger, fatter, wider leaf. It's making a bigger, girthier stalk. It's making a taller plant. There's also some PGRs out there that actually make a shorter plant, right? So it stunts that plant up. So, like for example, there's one that's used in wheat, so you can pour the nitrogen to it. So and
Okay.
keep that from not going
And it doesn't
down.
lodge. Yep.
Right? So the development piece of it, that is actually going from a physical growth stage. So when I reference PGRs and how they function, I'm going to talk about growth within a development period. Development can be going from seed to seedling into that architecture, that vegetative stage, into that reproductive stage. So when I talk about the growth, it's going to be within developmental stages. But when you think about PGRs, you think about what we're trying to accomplish in a crop. So typically what PGRs, most of the PGRs that we use, the hormones that we use, are to establish roots followed by shoots. And they are active in that order. They want to shove those roots down, and they want to establish a root system and put root hairs on them. The other thing that PGRs and hormones do is make the root hairs viable for a longer period of time, because root hairs don't last forever, right? They're viable for a period of weeks underneath environmental conditions, and then they will die off and it'll just reset new ones. Well, what if we can keep them for a longer period of time? That's a great place to absorb nutrients out of that soil profile. But they physically tell those plants what to do, just like hormones in our body tell us what to do. As men, we're predominantly testosterone with a little bit of estrogen, but that testosterone tells our body how to act. These hormones tell these plants how to act. So early season ones like IBA and kinetin, which kinetin I'm going to reference can actually be used all season long, but in early season application, it's going to shove those roots down and it's going to establish root hairs. And then it's going to turn and work on that above ground plant biomass. So it will establish the roots, and then it'll make a bigger, fatter, wider leaf and a bigger, girthier stalk. There's also hormones that are out there like GABA, so which is something that I've really put an emphasis on in bringing to life as a PGR and a regulated PGR and hormone. GABA, guys, works on abiotic stresses, nutrient mobilization within plants, so taking what you physically have and making it more efficient, and then also working on accepting sunlight and physically doing something with it. So that's a key.
So GABA's got to be short for something, right?
It's gamma aminobutyric acid.
Okay.
Can you repeat that to me?
Gamma something.
Aminobutyric acid.
Yeah.
Gamma aminobutyric
So,
acid.
But I'm glad that you picked up on that, because I was just thinking GABA is a element.
Well, yeah, I mean, he says it like we should know it, but I don't, and I'm just generally curious. Okay, so it's an acid.
Yeah.
Where does that even come from?
So I want to tell you about GABA and relate it to us as human beings. So I love referencing these PGRs to pharmaceuticals because that's very much what they're like. So if you think about GABA, GABA actually comes out of the human health environment. So you guys know the drug called Xanax?
Yeah.
Right? Many of us have taken Xanax or known people that have taken Xanax, and it helps on stress reduction in the human body. What Xanax does is tells the brain to make GABA, and that's what physically drops our stress as human beings. If you Googled GABA in plants, just as simple as that, you're going to find about 7 different things that pop up. The top 2 that come up is going to be stress reduction and nutrient mobilization. And it works in plants the same as it does in a human being by dropping that abiotic stress. So when it gets hot and dry, GABA will actually drive that stress down. A couple years ago, guys, where I live in Indiana, so I've got some farm ground that my wife and I donate to the FFA chapter, and it's right beside my house. And we put a product called Architect on it, which has got a nutrient package with the GABA, and it's an EPA registered product. And we had a very dry, stressful end of May all the way to pollination time period. All the corn around me looked like a pineapple, right? It rolled up and the leaves were pointing up, which is not a good sign, right? But plants naturally do that because they're trying to control that turgor pressure, right? That close those spores down, retain that water, right? And it's a natural defense mechanism. What GABA does is it controls that stomatal regulation and closes it up, but it lays that leaf wide open. So it's still collecting sunlight and it's still going as a factory. And as dry as it was, when I got to the pollination time period, which is we had perfect pollination weather, we had 2 ears on every single plant and every single one of them pollinated.
Wow.
It was crazy because I'd never seen anything like it. So I've never been able to do that with a traditional IBA, Kyneton, Giabacid type product early, which are all great products. There's great products that work early season for that root and shoot establishment. But when I think about managing a crop through stressful periods, GABA is one of the newer ones that is just phenomenal.
Yeah. So when you reference Xanax, it's obviously a prescription. You can't just go buy that anywhere. So now the agronomists need to start writing prescriptions for GABA.
Right? Got to be a doctor.
Yeah. But if you take Xanax one day, it doesn't mean Xanax is in your system helping you the next day, right? So,
Right.
but we're not out there spraying every day or every week.
Yep.
So how does it work for a long period of time?
Corey, you bring up a great point. Guys, I've dealt with these for a lot of years, and I've had a lot of farmers over the years that have told me, hey, I've used this product X, and I didn't see anything from it. So I want to talk to you guys about how you actually utilize these plant growth hormones and make sure that it's got the nutrition that it needs to support the function of what you just did and get a return on investment. Because there's nothing worse than going out and spending, $4, $6, $8 an acre and getting no return. So if I go out and I establish a root system early, Corey, and I drive those roots down, but I don't have any nutrition in that soil. Say I'm in a low CEC soil, and I just don't have the capacity to exchange that nutrition. Or it's been dry, and plants drink nutrients, right? So it's been dry. There's no opportunity to go out and drink those nutrients. You can make a bigger root system. You can even make a bigger, fatter, wider leaf. But if you don't have the nutrients inside it to support what it can do, then that's when we don't see the return on investment. So I always tell people, when you put a plant growth hormone in, whether it's in a starter fertilizer application or a early season post or a late season one, make sure you got the nutrients that support what that plant needs at that time. So, for example, if I make a bigger, fatter, wider leaf, that's a solar panel, right?
Yep.
Solar panels need copper, iron, manganese, zinc, molybdenum, boron to be able to accept sunlight and physically do something with it. If you're missing some of those, then you made a bigger, fatter, wider leaf for nothing, right? And that's when you don't see any ROI. But it's things to think about on how you physically make them function.
So that brings up a point we were talking about before we got on here about, you're talking about all this stuff, and it sounds really scary to me because it almost sounds like I could screw a lot of stuff up.
Yeah.
So is there some horror stories or things you don't want to do?
Yes, guys, just like a medicine, right? In the human health, you have to be careful of how much you put on. You got to be careful of when you use it. For example, there's some medicines that we take as adults that on the label says do not give to children under 12 years old, right? So when you think about these PGRs, certain PGRs go on at certain times. Gib-acid, I want to focus in on that one. So gib-acid's been around since the dawn of time for me.
And
right?
that's short for something, right?
Gibberellic acid.
Gibberellic,
right?
okay.
So gibberellic acid is phenomenal when it comes to germination. So a lot of folks will use that with a starter fertilizer additive in combination with like IBA, which is indole-3 butyric acid, and Kyneton, which is synthetic cytokinins. So they'll put gib-acid on. It'll help that germination, that early season plant vigor. Get it up and get it going. It's great. If you take a product that's meant in those combinations in that stage and use it late season, okay, you put it on tasseled corn, it'll actually cause arrested ear syndrome. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I had to demonstrate to
Arrested
customers.
ear syndrome.
It goes to jail.
So,
Uh-huh.
so look, boys, we all like beer bottles, right?
Yeah.
We do not like our ears on corn plants looking like beer bottles,
Yeah.
right? So we don't want to see that, and that's what happens. You'll have that severe tip back, and some people call it the beer bottling effect. Some people call it the beer can effect. But what it does is it takes yield and it messes up that plant because combinations like that, and guys, when you have combined hormones, they're in there in percentages that relate to each other for the time in which it's meant to go on. If you put something like that late season, you tell that plant to spend its energy developing roots followed by shoots. if I'm in a reproductive time frame, the last thing I want to do is tell a plant to spend its energy down below the ground.
Right.
I want to spend energy on what's called source distinct movement. That source distinct movement is pulling out that leaf tissue or that stalk and shoving it into that kernel, or in a soybean plant shoving it into that pod, or in a wheat plant shoving it into that head, right? So you can mess up plants by using things at the wrong time.
And this is on label.
So it's
Tells you
all on the
when.
label.
Okay.
So if you look at
So have a trusted agronomist, 1, but 2, read your labels.
Yes, and guys, look, you can't go off label on these things. You have to follow these labels. So a PGR, right, a hormone product that's EPA registered is going to have the booklet labels, just like you would have out of a chemical, a herbicide, right? So it's going to be very specific of timing. It's going to be very specific of rate ranges that you can use. So it'll have the maximum rates so that you can go up to.
You talk a little bit about that process of what it takes to get to be registered and how much money it takes and how long it takes.
Yes. So there's a reason I keep my hair short, right? Because I can't pull it out. But I went through a process. I went to Asia several years ago, back in 2019, and I came up with this concept that I was going to take GABA and put it into a fertilizer, and I was going to register it as a EPA registered product. And a guy looked at me and said, "That's never been done before." And I looked at him and I said, "Not yet." And it took 3.5 years. And lots of stressful moments. I had to go find some Xanax, right, to help me drive that down. But I was committed to being, and we were committed to finding a way to get that into a formulation and get it registered. So what we did is develop the first ever EPA registered foliar in U.S. history. And it's a product called Architect. It's a 10-5-5 built with micronutrients to accept sunlight, and then it has the GABA component in it. So it costs several $100,000 to just put it out there. It costs a lot of monies, right, to do that. You got to have some subject matter experts, and I have one of the best in the industry for my regulatory director, and she's fantastic. She did a lot of diligence working with the EPA to help them understand, because they've never registered a fertilizer before. So what we found is they would allow us to either just have a fertilizer and a EPA registered active ingredient. I would have loved to put some biostimulants in there, like a seaweed compound, but it was either a fertilizer or a registered active ingredient.
Okay. And is it like you do a lot of plots, a lot of testing, or what is that process?
Yes, so we had 3 years of testing, and that testing has to be not just field testing, right? So we obviously wanted to go to the field. It started in a lab, went to a greenhouse, went to the field for 3 years. But when you develop a product like that, you have to do skin irritation, eye irritation, human health type stuff, right? So there's the behind the scenes stuff that you've got to work with.
Yeah, there's humans spraying it, and then eventually stuff will make to the food system.
Yep.
Right. So there's a lot of safety.
Yep. So the toxicology studies is stuff that is a huge investment.
So back to the label side of things, when I'm reviewing some of the labels on your products, you're not putting a lot of this on.
No.
Like it's small amounts of
Yes.
PGR.
So Tanner, I had a guy one time, I was sitting in a meeting, he's an older gentleman, an older farmer, and I was talking about this product, and he gets on his phone, he's looking up the label, and he's like, it's got a 0.5% GABA in it. And he stops me, raises his hand, he says, "Gunny," he said, "I'm looking at your label, you got a 0.5% GABA on it, and you're only putting a quart per acre. How can that possibly be enough? And you're putting it on a little plant, right? And this is meant to go on
So a lot of it's hitting
B3
the
to
ground.
B5 corn, right? It's a lot hits the ground. I get it. But when you think about that 0.5%, I want to reference it to back to human health, something we can all relate to.
Yep.
All right, so you boys ever drink a little too much beer one night?
Yeah. Once in a while.
Yes.
Yeah, it happens from time
Once.
to time, right? And when you wake up the next morning and you've got that headache going on, what's the first thing you do?
Drink another one.
Drink another one. Tanner's going straight to the fridge, right?
Ibuprofen.
So you go and grab ibuprofen.
Yeah.
So Corey, I'm going to do some math with you, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go and you grab 3 ibuprofen to help manage that pain that day that you have it, and you take 3 200 milligram tablets of ibuprofen.
600 milligrams.
Take 600 milligrams. Okay. Now I want you to think that every day for a year,
You wake up with a hangover.
you wake up with a hangover, right? And you had to take 3 ibuprofen every day for a year. How many pounds of ibuprofen did you actually take?
How many grams are in a pound? Or what?
Milligrams.
Milligrams?
600 milligrams to, I don't know.
So it's 219,000 milligrams.
Yep.
How many milligrams are in a pound?
So there's 2.2 pounds per kilogram, right? So if you do the math, I'll help accelerate this for you. There's 0.48 pounds in that 219,000 that you just came up with.
0.4 of actual active
So it's
ibuprofen.
active.
So it's a half pound.
Yeah. So guys, we're a little less than half a pound. And that's the way we think as farmers and people in ag, right? We think in pounds. We don't think in milligrams, right? We're not on the other side of the water.
I mean, a lot of times we're talking tons per acre. and
Exactly.
Things, right?
So now let's go back to the day you need it. Take 0.48, divide it by 365,
Oh, jeepers. Well,
and it's a whole lot of zeros.
Yep.
And then that tells you how little it took to help us manage in our bodies the day that we actually need it. Plants are no different. I referenced when we first started this, these are just like pharmaceuticals. They are incredibly potent. Guys, you would never take and put half a pound of GABA on a corn plant. You would smoke it. You would straight up Cheech and Chong smoke this thing.
And just die.
Yeah, it would die.
You got to watch what you say because Dave went and put 600 pounds of Pell gypsum on his field.
Yep.
Because you guys were talking about gypsum.
Listen to this whole episode, Dave. Yeah.
Hey,
So-
a little bit's good, lots not good.
Yeah.
So then does the weather matter as we look at application windows? I mean, obviously we're trying to reduce stress when we talk about some of these application windows. That probably doesn't matter as much, but we've got rain in the forecast. We've had it just rain. Does that matter at all?
Let's talk about timing, and let's talk about what we're trying to accomplish and what the weather and how these hormones respond. So on a traditional IBA, kynotin, gib acid type product, it can either go in starter fertilizer or you want to use it early post with your herbicide. So timing absolutely matters, guys, for what we're trying to impact. If you look at the GABA plus fertilizer, what we recommend on that one is I love to see that between V3 and V5. The reason I say that is because between V3 and V5 is when a corn plant is determining the number of kernels around, right? And if I hit it at that time frame and I tell that plant to set another 2 or 4 more kernels around, that's significant. For example, if I go from 16 to 18 around, that's a 12.5% increase in kernel set. Now it's not a 12.5% guarantee in yield. It's 2 to 3% with data would suggest by itself if you set 2 more kernels around, which is significant, more than pays for products, right? You make money at that. But I share this with you because timing is very important. Like that's my target time frame for that product. Same with like the foliar IBA kynotin type products. They want to put them on early so you can impact and influence that time set of what a crop is physically doing. If you get rain, right, and you're rained out and you miss that window of opportunity and all of a sudden that corn plant, you're sitting out for 2 weeks and you're at V7, you probably ought to punt and think differently and go with a different product and not utilize it.
Yeah. We were going to put Architect on my first planted corn, and Ben actually said, what stage is that? I said, it's at V5, but probably by the time we get to spraying, it might be V6.
Yep.
And he said, not that it wouldn't work, its chance of success is probably not there. And he said the same thing, it's setting its kernels around. So we punted and just went to our next planting of corn. That was at V4 and sprayed it on there. Yep. So.
When you think about soybeans, I love corn, right? I'm from Indiana. You guys are from Iowa. We love corn where we're at in the I-States, right? But on soybeans, when you do an early season application and with the right technology, with the right hormones, you can actually induce what's called axillary branching. And those are the branches that put on pods, right? So we can set another 2 to 4 more axillary branches when you use the right technology at the right time. So I personally use that Architect on my post-herbicide trip on soybeans, and I hit it right at that V2, V3 time frame is when I hit it. So I hit it really early. And again, guys, I'm hitting a lot of dirt. I know it. I get it. It was designed to go on small little plants.
So would you maybe move your pre to a pre-post type application, right? Like maybe don't do the pre and then
To avoid another pass.
go early emergence type and spray there?
You can.
Yeah.
You absolutely can.
I'm just trying to think as a farmer, right? I'm trying to be more efficient. Like because we were spraying at like V4, V5.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we wouldn't have been out there at V2.
V4, V5 is still early,
Yeah.
right, in that plant growth, and you're still going to induce axillary branches. For me personally, the way that I hit it, I hit it V2, V3. And I share this with you because that is one that I've got enough plant biomass at that time, and I'm physically hitting enough leaf tissue with a quart to the acre that I'm actually going to make an impact.
Yep.
So do tank mixes matter?
Tank mixes matter. So you have to watch, especially with like the Ingenia, you got to be approved. Like so Architect would be approved. There's other chemistries that are out there and other hormones that are approved. So you got to make sure you follow that. You also have to make sure you do some compatibility testing. When I build a product, considering that I'm in charge of our product development, I try to put it with as many tank mixes as you possibly can because there's nothing worse than turning something into cottage cheese in the tank.
Yep.
So we don't want to do that, right?
So
we
are
gotta
you doing
make
the
stuff
jar
that works.
test, the put it in there and shake it up and let it sit, or what do you when you're trying to test tank mixes? How do you do that?
In the developmental stages, when I'm developing a product, yes, we do a lot of jar testing in the labs. And then we do a lot of stability tests. So we put it through chambers where it accelerates cold and heat.
Yep.
Just to see if we can break a product and break a tank mix. But with what we do in the lab, there's umpteen million different tank mix scenarios that are out there. I always encourage people, if it's something that's outside the normal boundaries, to do a jar test.
Yeah, we got to see your lab. So it was neat to see how that process can accelerate and how you can do those things. I remember, Corey, it's been almost 2 years ago, I think, you did a jar test, and it went really well.
That was a fertilizer, yeah.
Yeah, it went really well, but you almost didn't wait long enough, right?
Yeah, I mixed it, and I sat there, and I'm like, oh, yeah, good enough. And it was KTS and I think just 32. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Basically, mixing two things. I wanted some more potassium out there, and I let it sit overnight, and overnight it was like a crystal.
But what was the real problem? Hadn't you already mixed a tank?
Yeah,
Right on.
and it had issues. Yeah, yep, we crystallized.
So you did half of it right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I did it. I just didn't wait long enough.
Corey, I live by a motto in life: there are wins and there are learns, and
Yeah.
it's only loss if we
Learns.
choose not to learn from it. That was a learning opportunity for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't a total disaster. We were able to get it off, clean the lines and all that. Took a couple hours. That it's not like I had to go in the tank and chip it out, but just made us so we had to go basically apply twice. We still wanted the nutrients out there, so just had to apply it twice.
Obviously, we're a little bit late when we talk about the starter fertilizer side, but it's still a good topic to have out for people to think about as they make their plans for next year. Has there ever been a PGR that's been included in a seed treatment?
Yes, there are seed treatments that are utilizing PGRs. So there's gib acids that have been in seed treatments that have been used, and that's for the germination component of a gib acid. And also there's one that's called a polysaccharide, and it's chitosan. And chitosan is a pretty unique product, something that we're actually working on behind the scenes to do some field testing here. Probably about 2 or 3 years away from me launching a product in that space, but chitosan has some unique attributes to it that is pretty awesome, and that's more of a recent addition to the EPA's portfolio of products that they list underneath it.
Yep.
There's a 25B exemption, which we won't get in the regulatory side of things today because it'll bore you to death, but it's a polysaccharide that's used as a seed treatment.
I think the regulation is good to talk about, though, because there's a lot of products out there, and if I don't know if it's not registered, it seems like the Wild West,
Yes.
right? So how do I know if it's something that's safe for my farm?
Yep. So guys, there are a lot of products that are used to influence a plant. So there's the EPA registered list of plant hormones that are going to include your auxins, your polysaccharides, the different technologies that truly influence growth and or development. And then there are also biostimulants, and that's really the emerging technologies that are really being talked about today. Those are your seaweed compounds, your traditional and biochemically extracted kinds, they're your organic acids, they're your sugar alcohols, the protein hydrolysates of the world. Those are something that I spend a lot of time with because I'm telling you, if you understand them and how to use them and the ratios to include them into products, you can get a hormonal effect without being a true hormone, classified by the EPA. So in our industry, guys, there are some companies that have added some IBA and kynotin into products, and they just hide them. Here's the deal. One, they're obviously supposed to be registered, but two is when you do stuff like that, you also got to understand that some of these hormones are not viable in the presence of water, right? So even if you do add them into it, they're not viable. So within 2 weeks, most like IBA, for example, the half-life of IBA in the presence of water is 2 weeks, right? So you're cut in half. Your potency is cut in half every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So by the time it gets to a farm, it's
unless
it's
you're
gone.
unless you're filling the sprayer right out of the spigot at the factory,
Right.
it's it takes 2 weeks to get to you.
Yep.
Probably.
So I mean that happens, but honestly, guys, what
So why put it in? If you know it's not going to be viable at the farm gate,
Yep.
why even include it? Just for a, but they're, yeah.
It's a great question. It's a bunch of miseducation and misinformation. It's what's happened out there.
Yeah, I'll
and
leave
it's a
that.
learning curve.
Yep.
And how
I
do
just
you
think about
how do you find that out? How do you test it? Like you pull it out and take it to the lab and say like this is dead or it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, the way that I learned it is I was trying to come out with an EPA registered foliar, and I was taking technologies, hormones, and putting them in just to see how viable they'd be over time. And I put it through a PSL product safety lab, and which are certified government labs, right? They're certified by the government. But I've learned these lessons that within 2 weeks, like jib acid, you put that in the presence of water and it smokes it. Like it's gone. Like jib acid, just you have to have an alcohol-based solution. It will not stay viable in the presence of water.
But we're spraying water when we're
Okay,
spraying these
so
products.
now when I talk about it, that's another good point. So when you put it in a tank mix, obviously water tank mix, you can go to the field and it's viable just fine. However, let's say that you mix a load, Corey, and you get rained out today, and all of a sudden Mother Nature doesn't turn that spigot off for 10 days, 2 weeks, your potency has gone down. It's just a fact. It has. So, because it does degrade in the presence of water.
I just think about that, and when we treat cattle, right, they ship us a powder and a distilled water in order to preserve that vaccine. So it immediately, it's been, I don't know the right word's preserve to use, but introduce the water to it, put it into the animal, and now it's active.
You rehydrate.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Makes you wonder if that's something that could go the route of prolonging the life of some of these that are involved in the PGR side. But what are some red flags? Like I said, that's misunderstanding at the point of product creation, and that's only something that you figured out through testing. Does it stink when I open it up? I think of dead things, right? They smell bad. Do I open it up and be like, these are dead? You know what I'm talking about?
I was telling him about some more humic-based biology that I had last spring, and it smelled great when I opened it, and then 3 weeks later, it smelled like rotting corpse. It was terrible. So something was dead.
So guys, when it comes to the hormone side of things, these are synthetic. Then most of them aren't going to have a smell, right? So in fact, if anything, you're going to smell an alcohol in most of them, right? A propylene glycol type smell is going to happen with it.
And that's when you get arrested ears.
On the biostimulant side of things, which is something that, man, I'd love to do an episode with you guys on biostimulants when it comes to the amino acids, the protein hydrolysate, which is a fancy word for a refined amino acid, and then the seaweeds and organic acids. Some of those can have some just awful smell. There's one that I put into a formulation for a in-furrow application. So I'm convinced something that smells that bad has just got to work, right? Because this thing stinks to high heaven. So it's actually over in Asia here 2 months ago. And I was looking at a new peptide technology, something that's not been realized in agriculture until now, that I'm doing a lot of field research with this year. Guys, this thing, when you open it, it hits your senses pretty quick, right? And it's again, one of those, it's something that smells that bad. There's got to be some kind of effect that it's going to do. But it's I'm pretty excited about what this thing does. Anymore, some of these biostimulants, guys, are outperforming what we know as PGRs and hormones, the way that they're working. Now, the way they work is a different function than a hormone. Hormones physically tell a plant what to do, biostimulants work to increase the efficacy of nutrition quite often inside of plants and therefore get the outcome of what we typically see out of a typical hormone. It's just a different avenue of how we get there. So it's a whole different conversation, hence not why regulated by EPA.
So what am I missing out on? Right? We're doing an episode on PGRs.
Yep.
Really PGHs.
Yep.
And I've never used them.
Yep.
Am I really missing out?
If you're wanting to push a crop and you're truly wanting to manage a crop, Tanner, I believe that these hormones have a fit in operations. Guys, understand how to use them. They're part of a program. When I talk about farming, I think about farming in 5 different phases. There's that foundation phase that is combine to planter. There's the seedling, the establishment phase, which is getting that crop up and getting it going. There's an opportunity for plant growth hormones there with GIB and IBA and kinetin going either as a seed treatment or as a starter fertilizer additive. There's also the next phase is that architecture phase, and that's about building that plant structure, building the bigger, fatter, wider leaves to be able to create a solar panel and also build a fuel tank to hold and store nutrients so that when we get to the next phase into reproduction, that we can manage that reproductive plant health. So there's a package there that I developed back in launched in 2020, specifically for reproductive plant health. And then there's the maturity phase. And through most of those phases, now the foundation phase, there's nothing really there that can be used. But those other 4 phases, especially those middle 3, that's where we can use PGRs or hormones to our benefit. We can get that crop established. We can develop a factory that's going to help it metabolize and use nutrients efficiency. And then we can retain yield potential at the end of season.
So we're here last 2 weeks of June. We didn't do anything early season.
Yep.
Can we still, is it a waste of time, a waste of money to implement something here for the rest of this year? Or is that okay to, maybe I listen to this show and I want to give some PGRs a try?
Yep. So Tanner, as I drove up here this morning from Ankeny, so I stayed in Ankeny last night, your crops look beautiful, right? They're past V5 and they're well into being almost hip high in several cases on me. When I think about traditional hormones as we know them, they have the IBA and kinetin type products, that's past that point, even past the point of like our GABA in that specific application. The next opportunity that you guys have here is going to be for late season. But as I was yesterday, I was in southern Illinois. And southern Illinois still had some planters rolling. There's still an opportunity for those guys to use early season PGRs yet this season. In fact, as late as it is, as planters roll, I want to get that plant kicked in the rear and I want to get it to go. So I'm going to recommend a lot of PGRs in that environment, right, to catch that crop up quickly. When it gets into fungicide season, this is one, guys, back in 2020, I launched a product that had 3 parts to it. It had kinetin, which is the same kinetin that we use early, but kinetin can be used all season long. And it had GABA, which is the same GABA that I use early season. It's at a different rate. And then also it had choline chloride, which choline chloride is not a chloride molecule, so it's not like you'd normally think of chloride. It's actually a vitamin B4 derivative that works on photosynthetic activity. And what this product does is it drops stress in plants. It tells it to mobilize nutrient source to sink and utilize the photosynthesis efficiently. What that does is it prevents that pod abortion. It prevents that tip back on corn. It prevents that kernel abortion in wheat, and it retains that yield. Now, when you retain that yield, I also know that I got to make sure I've got that nutrition in that plant to fill that yield out. I love to tell people, like on soybeans, when we get in that first week of August, you guys know what I mean by top crop, that top cluster of soybeans that are there. We get excited because there's the next 5 to 6 bushel. Then all of a sudden, Mother Nature does what? She gets hot, she gets dry, and bye-bye top crop, right? It's gone. This will force that plant to hold on to those fruiting sites, those pods. Now, there's a trick to this, guys. To see an ROI in that, you got to make sure you've got the food needed to fill those fruiting sites out, right? The food that's most important late season, I'm going to use soybeans specifically, late season on soybeans, is potassium. Right? We need potassium to make those beans that are in those pods physically larger. If you only have limited amounts of potassium, let's say it's been dry and the plant's not drinking nutrition out of the ground, you need to apply a foliar potassium. I love potassium acetate. It's more efficient than any form of other foliar potassium on the market. And what that will do is we'll fill those additional fruiting sites, those additional pods out. When I tell people it's not like your dining room table. So let's say you have 6 plates. What this does is add 2 more plates to the dining room table. If you don't have additional food in the kitchen to put on those additional plates, then you're just moving food around and your outcome is the same. Your yield is the same. You need additional food in the kitchen to be able to fill out those 2 plates the same as you filled the other 6 plates. Mm-hmm. That's where I start seeing the incremental yield gains and the incremental test weights.
If it was my wife, then you just sit there and make the new grocery order.
Right?
Yeah.
Order it to the app, right?
Then the drone comes in and sprays it on.
Yeah.
So staying on beans, I've heard the PGRs in the soybean side of things that like physically actually do like, okay, it's going to prevent the plant from getting too tall. It's going to stack nodes. What would that be?
Yeah. So GABA, when you use it in soybeans, will stack nodes. So a lot of cases where I go out, I can tell a guy when they physically sprayed a product that's got GABA in it. So Architect early, because what will happen is you'll start seeing a nodal stacking. It shortens those nodes, which is a great thing, right?
Yeah.
We love shorter soybeans, right? Because it's less distance to transfer nutrients. And then eventually it runs out of gas. And you can tell that when it runs out of gas. And then if you come back in with like the Onward Max, which has GABA in it again, it'll stack those nodes again. And I'll be able to come out and say, okay, you hit this at R2, for example, or R3, for example, and it'll stack those nodes again. So which is a great thing. So we want to stack those nodes. Is it extreme stacking where it makes midget beans?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't do that. But does it stack those nodes? Absolutely, it does. Yeah. Now, there's also some hormones that extend those nodes that make them even longer. So you have to be a little bit careful when you think about that and how much you push a plant. Because the last thing you want is beans that are 5 feet tall, right, or 6 feet tall, and everybody's like, "Ooh, look how big my beans are," and then they look how flat the beans are, right, when the combine rolls.
Well, Tanner's in-laws got some byproduct that.
Yeah, we might have. We'll finish this topic before we stop recording. Matt, have a little private agronomic insights. Pick your brain a little bit on what this 120 acres is going to look like.
Yeah,
a lot of nitrogen.
There's going to be. Yeah, basically there's going to be nearly 200 pounds, and they want to plant beans in it because of how late we are in the year.
Oh my.
Mm-hmm. That's what I said. I would switch to like 100-day corn, and I mean they're not paying for the product, so I was like, you're actually money ahead.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
Yep. So let's hit the future of PGRs.
Yeah.
What do you see coming down the pipeline? You kind of talked about biostimulants a little bit, that's probably weaved into the future more.
Yep.
But what are you seeing?
So, guys, we're going to see more coming out of the pharmaceutical world. For example, here recently in the last 2 years, there's been an active ingredient called salicylic acid that has been registered. Salicylic acid is aspirin, right? And it works as another way of stress reduction. There's some limitations to it. You can only use it once in a year. I personally would not use it twice a year. It pushes the plant in a different direction than like GABA does. So it has its limitations, but you will see more coming out of the pharmaceutical world as a future of true hormonal effect. The other thing that you're going to see just more and more information on is just the biostimulant world. We're working with the government and the Biostimulant Coalition to be able to recognize and put on label the biostimulants, and I think that's an opportunity for us as farmers and retailers to actually get educated on what's in products and be able to understand how to use them. When it comes to these pharmaceutical pieces, guys, this is, to me, it excites me. I'm a patient at Mayo Clinic, so I love to geek out on this type of stuff. So it's exciting for me to watch these things because some of these things, obviously, we've taken, and it's fun to see them work in agriculture.
Yeah. Explain biostimulant. I mean, we say it, we know bio and we know stimulant, but what it's like, I'm a fifth grader. What is it?
Yep. So biostimulants are going to be your products such as seaweed or kelp type products. It's going to be amino acids. It's going to be the protein hydrolysates. It's going to be your organics, your humic acids, your fulvic acids. That's the classification of what we call biostimulants.
And I've used seaweed before, but why? Why is seaweed?
Yep. So seaweed
reduces methane when cows fart.
Does it?
Supposedly.
Yeah. So, guys, a lot of times when we use seaweed, I love combining seaweed with nutrient packages because what it does is it enhances the efficiency of nutrients within plants. So, basically, helps it go from point A to point B is what it's going to do. So, that's a lot of what seaweed does. A lot of times, people tout the amount of cytokinins in seaweed. It's actually very small, but it has a cytokinin effect, which means an auxin type effect where it will help establish roots. It just doesn't tell a plant to establish roots like IBA does,
Yeah.
which is registered. It enhances the nutrient mobilization within plants, and therefore you get the effect of a hormonal effect.
And what about a seaweed? Like, did someone go,
I thought he was
that
gonna
plant
say-
growing under the water, I could do something with that and take it to my cornfield.
Yep.
How does that even come?
I thought he was going to talk about combining it with like raw fish and rice, rolling it up into a nice, tasty morsel.
Yeah, tasty's to be debated. Like when I was in Asia, boys, I'm going to debate that.
Yeah.
But when you think about the seaweeds, the other thing that's going to emerge in this, Corey, is we're going to see a lot more on different species that are coming. Ascophyllum nodosum is one that everybody's got, so you will see a lot more different species that are coming out that have different functions. Like for example, there's one that's coming out. Eclonia maxima is getting a lot more attention today. It's a more of a late season seaweed, and it supports kind of the function of what like Onward Max would do, with helping that plant retain its yield.
So is there seaweed farms?
There is, and it's legit. Like I saw them. Like when I was in Asia, it's cool. It's just off the coast, and it's just lined farms in the water. It's really cool to see.
And they like plant it?
I don't know how you plant seaweed. Put a drill
Scuba-
out there.
scuba gear?
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about all these old hog barns. You know, we've had a couple of episodes where we talk about, you know, a lot of the barns built in the 80s and 90s,
Oh, yeah.
and they're getting hard to remodel and make the ROI make sense. Maybe you could grow seaweed in those pits.
Maybe.
I'll
I think
have to-
we should take a product from corn and take it to the seaweed farms. Somehow.
Yeah. Right.
Like, give it back to them.
That's right. That's right.
You'll see a lot more with peptides coming out in that biostimulant world. That's just phenomenal technology. The data that I've seen, guys, and the results that I've seen is as impressive as any hormone as I've ever seen.
How do you figure out where to even start in the process? Like, you find a hole that hasn't been filled, and then I'm going to go to Asia and find this product. I don't like, explain that process.
So I've got a couple slides that I'm going to share with you guys, and I'm going to put up on this deal. One of them, I'm going to show the classification of products and how they fall, and then I'm also going to talk about one that I put together a matrix over the years of active ingredients and non-active, so the biostimulant stuff, what we call inert ingredients, and how they function. So a lot of times in our industry, what we've done is we've stumbled upon something. We stumbled upon that tree that kills broadleaves,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And then all of a sudden we found a fit in agriculture for something we stumbled upon. Well, now there's such a portfolio and library of products that are out there, we can start working our way backwards. And what I mean by that is if I think about what I want to accomplish, whether it's enhanced nutrient efficiency within plants, or I want to establish roots, or I want to increase photosynthetic activity, or I want to drop abiotic stress. Put together this matrix, got all these functions, and then I put together all the list of actives and inert actives and what they do. And it's a matrix that shows me what does what. For example, like if I wanted to take an amino acid, right? So the GABA piece, the gamma aminobutyric acid. That particular one does nutrient performance, abiotic stress, some biotic stress. It works on nitrogen fixation. It works on fruit quality. It works on amino acids can work on chlorophyll production and photosynthetic activity, right? So all of those things. Now, not every single amino acid does every single one of those, but that group works on those. Or if I look at auxins, for example, so that IBA type product, auxins work on nitrogen fixation, anti-lodging. They work on root development, right? So it depends on what I'm looking to accomplish is how I'll design a product. So I work backwards. So
Yep.
I think about what's my end game. And the biggest thing to me, like when I developed the architect product that's got that GABA piece in it, my big thing is I'm looking at our environment change over the years. And And I'm looking like the last 3 years where I live in Indiana, up near Lafayette, Indiana. I've watched the end of May that spigot turn off, and then it's dry all the way to pollination, and it's been that way for 3 consecutive years. Now this year we're actually getting some rain here in June. But I think about those pattern shifts, and we get in stressful situations, or I think about going out to Nebraska, for example, where it's traditionally dry. How can we help a plant go through those abiotic stresses, that heat stress and that drought stress? GABA is phenomenal in those situations. Right? So I worked my way backwards to develop a product to work into that piece.
Right.
To come up with a solution to solve a problem.
So you were in Asia earlier this year
Yes.
studying a new technology.
Yes.
How did you even figure that out? You got some guy in a corner, like some biostimulant dealer, like, hey, I gotta get this new stuff. You gotta come check it out.
I do. I do. I can't say his name, but he's a little short guy. And for me just to call somebody short, like
Yeah.
he's really short,
Yeah.
right? So, but he's been a tremendous influence on my career and my life, on teaching me a lot of stuff from a plant physiology side of things. But there's one that comes out of chicken feathers, right? Which is crazy. It's a keratin-based peptide that works on inducing plant functions, metabolic functions, that I came across that was new, and I wanted to go research it. And I wanted to see the science behind the scenes. I wanted to see the growth chambers. I wanted to see it work in fields. They have lots of rice fields. But I wanted to also talk and figure out, how does it work in formulations? Because I don't want to just sell a straight product. I want to build it into the nutrients that needs it, the support cast that it needs to have into it in a full package.
I thought Chicken Feathers was somebody's mafia name.
We'll call the short guy. His name's Chicken Feathers.
Yeah, sure. Got we'll call him Chicken Feathers. But it's there's technologies, guys, that I've brought out of Central Asia, Western Asia, South Africa, Europe, and worked with companies from all around the globe. Later this year, I'm going to be going to Spain to do some investigative work on some technologies.
And are you like undercover when you go do that?
I am. I don't wear AgX on the shirt, so
It's just amazing to me. I mean, what's once a waste product, feathers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like dead animals for livestock. It's taking something that's a byproduct now and creating something of high value out of, like in the dead livestock, they can literally separate the white and red blood cells and all that and create some pretty cool stuff with that. I mean, it's amazing.
Corey, you talk about how that's separated.
Yeah.
That's important to also talk about in this plant hormones or the biostimulants is how things are extracted. So traditional extractions, guys use KOH, potassium hydroxide, in a lot of cases. I like to work with companies that use enzymatic extractions because it keeps the molecule intact. Right? KOH is pretty caustic, and it can denature a compound and weaken its potency.
Yep.
So it's not just about what it is; it's also about how it's extracted.
So we're talking about pharmaceutical grade stuff earlier, and we're trying to relate everything back to human health and all that. A lot of humans know about like HGH, steroids that are, banned in sports and things like that. And then we have things like stem cells that there's a lot of cool stuff coming out of. Is there anything in this space that is banned or like would make the corn just absolutely grow 600 bushel?
It's a great question. None that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I know that there's been some stuff that was well before my time in my career, predates 25 years ago, that isn't being used today. I can't rattle them off the top of my head.
Right. I just wondered if is there like the Barry Bonds of, corn plants out there that like, nope, you can't grow that. China wouldn't buy it. It's too much or got something bad in it. So
Yeah.
corn's got little muscles.
It's flexing on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it gets arrested.
Deformed kernels.
Yeah.
Now you got double.
Guys, can I summarize with a
Yep.
walkthrough on the technologies to use
Yep.
throughout
I think that'd be a great way to wrap
Yep.
it up.
So I like to start with that. Let's just go to that establishment phase of getting that crop up and getting it going. Guys, this is where gib acid, IBA, kynotin type products can really fit, right? And either as a seed treatment or as a in-furrow starter fertilizer additive. I like it in-furrow versus 2x2 because you're directly on top of that seed and influencing that seminal root system, which is the first root system out of corn. I've also seen it work on soybeans as well. So for those of you that have access to be able to put it on soybeans, so those are great ones. Biostimulants that are out there with protein hydrolysates and seaweeds also work in those starter additive as well from a biostimulant piece, but we'll focus on hormones today. So I like those compounds there. When it comes to those post-trip applications, so your herbicide trip, and if you hit corn at V3 to V5 and you hit soybeans early, that's where I love to see more so of the IBA and kinetin in that one. I think you're obviously past the germination point of gib acid. But then I also like obviously the GABA piece, and it just serves in a different function, right? To increase the nutrient mobilization inside of that plant and start building that factory out. So that's the second step, going into that architecture phase to build that factory, build that fuel tank, that solar panel. From there, look at a kinetin, choline chloride, and GABA formulation late season. And what that will do is drop stress, increase nutrient mobilization to help support that source to sink movement inside of plants, and will also increase the photosynthetic efficiency of that plant, and it needs that energy. So it'll retain the yield and help that plant drive nutrients into that source to sink. Giving yield and test weight is what we see. Those are 3 time frames in which I recommend to use these plant growth hormones, that if you do this and actually manage a crop and make sure that it's got the supporting cast, the nutrients that it needs during the time in which you put in it, apply those. That's where you see ROI. That's where you see yield increases of the 5, 10, 15% that I've witnessed for year after year. So challenge yourself, guys, as farmers, to think differently and think outside the box, and talk with agronomists that you trust, and get their perspective on how to use them. Make sure you're using the right stuff at the right time. There's a lot of folks that go out and say, hey, I've got a 3-way and they've got the gib acid type products and want to put it on tassel corn. You'll see a beer bottle corn and it'll mess up your crop. So we don't want to do that. But know what you're putting out. Understand that these are incredibly potent, just like a pharmaceutical, back to our ibuprofen scenario. A little bit's good, a lot's not good. So make it fit in your applications. So what I mean by that is these are designed to go in the tank mixes in which you put them in. For example, the Onward Max piece goes with fungicide, right? So it's not a special trip.
Right. We're ROI driven, and I think farmers have, for years, as long as, I remember when fungicides were really becoming popular, well, it paid for itself. Well, you lost if it just paid for itself.
Yes.
Right? Because
Not worth doing.
Not worth doing. You put it in there, you had to handle the product. It's your time. What do you target for an ROI? Is there a specific, like, we got to have 3x?
Yes. My goal in my personal product development is a 4-to-1 return, right? I would say industry standard is a 3-to-1 return. So I'm shooting for a 4-to-1 return. Obviously, commodity prices have a lot to do with that return.
Right.
Yeah.
So even a 3-to-1 return is a solid return to me.
Yep.
But I'm with you. I do not want to go out and invest $5 an acre and get $5 back.
Yeah.
I want to put $5 out there and I want to see 15 back.
Yep.
You know, a misunderstanding to a lot of folks in manufacturing, agriculture manufacturing and retail is that the perception that farmers need to get 20 bushel for every single product that they put out there. Here's what I've witnessed and what I believe to be true. I believe if I come to your guys' farm and I come to you and say, hey, look, you're going to invest a bushel and you'll see 4 to 5 back, right? Only you can answer, is that worth it to you? Right? If you just do that one thing.
Yep.
Now, if you do the steps, the programmed effect, that's where I've seen you're
Yeah,
going to
if you
invest.
follow Billy's envelope.
Right. Listen to Billy Carter, and you're gonna make some bushels, right? But if that one product gives you 3 or 4 bushels back, let's say for example on soybeans, if you used Onward Max, for example, that's all the only hormone that you used, and you put that with your fungicide, and it was let's see, it would be less than 1 bushel investment. Okay, so it's less than 1 bushel investment. Typically, we see a 5 to 6 bushel return on that. But let's say it's only 3. Okay, less than 1, so let's call it an even 1, and you see 3 back. Is that worth it to you? Only you can answer that as a
Right.
farmer.
Yeah, and sometimes when you start measuring in such small quantities, 2 or 3 bushels, like, is that even statistically
Feasible.
feasible? Like, or was it something
Yeah.
else?
What's the margin of error?
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
But what I have witnessed is the guys that truly manage their crops, right? These things start to add up and start giving exponential returns. And that's what I've witnessed and what I believe to be true. And I think just some education along the lines of understanding what you're putting out there and when to put it out there. Make sure that you get it on at the right time, because the wrong time will give you no effect.
what about, is there, like, if we're out there, we can take a soil sample and we can know what nutrients in the soil. We can take a tissue sample and know what nutrients are in the plant. Is there any tests that we could do to say, we need to put this plant growth hormone or PGR on?
None that I'm aware of when it comes to something that we test for today. I'll tell you guys that this is a combination of art and science. Like, for example, like Corey, you may have just an abundant amount of potassium. Say you got super high base saturations of potassium, and you're like, man, I'm sitting so good. I know I've got this, but the weather's been dry, right? And understanding that plants drink nutrients, and it takes water to solubilize those nutrients for plants to drink them. You may have all the potassium in the world sitting underneath that plant, but your plant can't access it.
Yep.
So you need to still apply like a foliar potassium. But you also need to put something on there that's going to help drive roots in that ground so that you have more opportunities for when it does rain, that you can capture that potassium.
Well, I think that was a lot of information for our audience, and I appreciate you laying it out because we're here mid-June. We've mentioned that it's going to be towards the end of the June, maybe 1st of July before someone picks up this episode, and I don't want them to feel like they're behind.
Right.
I want them to better understanding that they can do something this year, or they can start making their plan for next year.
Yes.
Was there any other slides? I know you had several slides you want to talk about. I feel like we only talked about one.
And we had 2 of them in there. But no, I do thank you, one, just for the way you can relate it, at least for me to understand, especially when you relate it to human health and the things that we can put into the human realm that apply to the plant side. And it is neat to know that there's a lot of different formats, a lot of different ways to go about this, what to watch out for, red flags to monitor, making sure that we hit the right time of year to be able to put that together. So that'll probably be the end of that conversation, but I still want my free agronomic insights. So do you have your phone on you? Because I texted you a picture of it, if you've got it in your pocket.
I do.
Of the analysis that we got. So just to frame this up for the listeners, appreciate you tuning in. If you want a little perspective here, stick with us for the next
This
5
is like the
7
after
minutes.
show.
It's like an after show. So there's a local ethanol plant, cellulosic ethanol plant. They've got a byproduct that they use to help ferment and do the process. Anyway, they identified that they are full. It's the end of June. There's not a lot of fields available to put this product on.
Yep.
Our feed yard, the in-laws, use rye. This is a rye oats mix that we typically harvest off for forage and then plant beans into is almost like a double crop process on an annual basis. So being one of the only fields left available, supposedly they have 1 million gallons of this that they have to get rid of. So it's going to equate to about 9,000 gallon an acre of that analysis that you're seeing. The crop rotation plan that we were in was to put soybeans after this rye that we chopped off this week, probably getting it applied Monday, Tuesday of next week, and then plant whenever 9,000 gallon dries out on the soil. So as you look at that picture, give the audience an idea of what this analysis looks like because they're not looking at it with you.
Yeah. Okay. So per 1,000 gallons on this one, I'm looking at 21.7 pounds of organic in. So if you take that times 9, because you said you're running 9,000, you're at over.
It's 195, 196.
Yeah, so let's call it 200 pounds for easy math,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're 200 pounds of math. You got 6.7 pounds of phosphate. You got 37.6 pounds of potassium, which is great. That's really going to benefit soybeans. The sulfur's at 2.4 pounds, so that's roughly a 1 to 10 ratio, or 10 to 1 ratio of nitrogen to sulfur, which is really good ratio
Yeah.
for corn. And then you've got some calcium in there, which is great for all crops, right? At 17.1 pounds. You do have a little bit of sodium in there at 1.6 pounds. Not an astronomical amount, so not too terrible worried about that one. But let's talk about what soybeans do and when you have high amounts of nitrogen. So I've seen guys that have pre-planted nitrogen, and then it turns off wet. It gets late, and they're like, you know what? Let's go plant soybeans. And what it can do is it can cause really tall, lanky soybeans. And these rank soybeans, what they do is late season, they start to lay down when they get a strong wind. So you run the risk of that. Now you have a lot of potassium in this, which is great. So if it continues to rain, you can access that potassium and it'll help fill those out, which is good for soybeans. I get a little nervous when I see that much nitrogen on there. I'm probably going to be thinking about any way that I can stack it. Stack those nodes. GABA obviously is one that I use to stack nodes, so I would consider GABA in that situation. I for dang sure would not put anything that elongates cell division or works on cell division or works on elongating cells, right? So those auxin type chemistries I would stay away from because you're only going to compound that impact of nitrogen. So I would stay away from a hormone that does that. I'm kind of with you, Corey. I would think about maybe switching into like a 100-day corn hybrid or short season, maybe a 95-day.
Well, and the other thing is it's right by their feed yard, so they can do high moisture corn or earlage on this.
Yes.
So it's really not even a factor of is it going to dry down,
Correct.
right?
There's options.
Yes.
Yeah. And corn, we all know this. We've all ran the numbers on corn and soybeans. Corn works better at $4 than beans do at 9 or 10.
Yes.
And so, and you didn't have to pay for this product, right? Because they wanted to get rid of it. So monetarily wise, they'd almost be dumb not to listen to you and put corn in. Because if they put beans in, it's going to cost them more because they're going to have to put GABA on a bunch.
Yes, like a bunch.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine, my best friend, farms about 45 minutes west of me. And for us, double crop soybeans where I live up in that Lafayette, Indiana area, which is 45 minutes northwest of Indianapolis, double crop soybeans are just hit and miss. And if we get an early frost, they're done, and we just don't really see anything. But if we can get 30, 35 bushel an acre, we've done pretty well on double crop stuff. He switched a couple years ago and started planting double crop corn. Now we take wheat off like right around July 4th where I live. So by the time he gets corn in there, we're sitting second week of July, and it seems like risky business. Mm-hmm. It's some of the most profitable corn he raises.
Huh.
So you put like
Planted
a 75-day corn in or like a real short?
85.
85?
Yep, that's an 85-day corn. It's light test weight, right? I will say
Sure.
it comes out at light test weight. However, he's made some amazing yields on corn planted in July. Obviously, no crop insurance on that, right? But I think it's awesome. He challenges the status quo of what we do in farming, and now look, we push it. Like we know that we have to get that plant up and getting it going, so we actually use plant growth hormones to get that plant up and get it going. So that way we beat the frost for black layer, right? So.
That corn has a thick Canadian accent, I would bet.
Oh yeah, yeah. Hey, look, his local seed guy does not usually sell that hybrid, so I can tell you that.
No, that's cool. Well, thanks for that insight. I'm glad that it's coming from the two of you and not from me, because maybe it'll stick when I send him this audio file as to some decisions that need to be made. But as always, Gunny, we appreciate you coming up here and hanging out with us. It is always fun to see you. Fun to have you in studio.
Appreciate it, guys.
I can't wait for the next time.
Yep.
So yeah, go check out AgX, everybody. Make sure you check out everything tied to Farm for Profit. And until next time, have a good one.